Yo guys, and welcome back to the channel. So today we're going to be talking about a new player experience guide for Wuthering Waves. So Wuthering Waves is one of my favorite games of all time, but I know there's a ton of information that you might need to know about Wuthering Waves to really enjoy the experience. So this video is hopefully going to be an all-encompassing guide that kind of helps players move from the very beginning of their journey, going over the new player events and the basics of combat, all the way through to endgame and those kind of activities. Because of that, the video is going to be a little bit longer, so feel free to use the chapters down below in the description to kind of find what you might be looking for. Again, we're going to be going over a lot of topics here, so feel free to use those and skip around as needed. So as with any game that we cover on this channel, combat and gameplay are always going to be the most important things, and Wuthering Waves is quite complicated in terms of combat and what characters can do, how they can buff each other, and just different interactions even in their own kits. But there are a few things that we can talk about really quickly that just kind of give you an idea generally about how the game works, how to set up teams, etc. Something we should talk about really quick is the way to actually see your skills and stuff. So if you hit C, you'll be able to go to this menu directly, and you can go ahead and open this right here. So this has all of the characters' skills, their normal attack, resonance skill, forte, resonance liberation, intro skill, outro skill, and tune break. Specifically, you're going to often be looking at things like outro skills, intro skills, and then trying to understand their forte. And also just know that anywhere in this video where I talk about ultimates, I'm talking about resonance liberation. And then if I say skill, I'm probably talking about the resonance skill. So one thing that you might notice is on screen right now, there's a couple of gauges here that we have by our health bar. This gauge over here on the left that's already full with the fire symbol here, this is going to be our concerto meter. Now, when you switch characters on a character that has a full concerto meter, what will happen is the current character, in this case Imeth here, she will do her outro, and then what will happen is the character we switch to will come in and they will immediately do their intro. By having the meter full on one character, you do actually proc both abilities, and it is going to be really important to your actual gameplay that you're making the most out of this. So characters like Denia here actually buff their teammates, and that's usually the case in a lot of different characters. There'll be some buff they apply via their outro. When it comes to a character's intro, typically intros are damage related, or there's some kind of component that helps them regain their forte or some kind of resource that they need in order to use their skills more effectively. So in general, it's usually pretty important that you're getting the buff from an outro, and then the intro usually helps kind of set up your rotation and gets the character ramping faster. So it is pretty important to make sure that you're using this concerto meter effectively. So my current team is Imeth as my main DPS, Denia as my sub DPS slash buffer, and Shorekeeper as my just overall support slash healer. So what I need to do is for this team, I want to take the buffs from Shorekeeper and the buffs from Denia and get them on Imeth. So I do need to make some kind of rotation in that way. So potentially, depending on the character you have, you might do like a Shorekeeper into Denia into Imeth as your main DPS. So that could be your support into your sub DPS into your main DPS, but other times you may have to change that rotation. But typically that's going to be the kind of rotation that you go into, because your support will oftentimes be able to buff both your sub DPS and your main DPS. Now there is something here that can trip you up, and you do have to pay attention to the wording on the outro. So this character here, for example, it specifies that only the incoming resonator gets this amplification for 14 seconds or until they're switched out. Alternatively, we have characters like Shorekeeper, who, as I said, is my support that I'm trying to get the buffs on both my sub DPS and my main DPS. And so you can see one of her benefits is that all nearby party members get a damage amplification. So that's kind of the wording difference that you have to pay attention to. Now, another thing that you'll notice is actually that there is a gauge right here on all of our characters. And notice how every single character has a different gauge. So Shorekeepers, Denias, and Imeths all look different. So that's actually by design. And that's because this is their forte. This is their unique thing that makes them special in some way. Every single forte is slightly different. Some of them are closer than others, but some of them are pretty different. So you kind of have to understand how their forte works. Something to make note of though is that every forte more or less works the same way. You fill the meter, you spend the meter in some way. Now what you spend it on or how is going to be different depending on the character, but almost every single character wants to just fill the meter and then spend it. Now, there are tutorials that you can find in game that can kind of help give you an idea for this. If you hit the guidebook section and you go down here to the path of growth, you'll go down and you'll see Resonator combat training right here. And so this can kind of be used to go and look at any of the characters that you do own and give you an idea. If you click go, it'll actually take you to a simulation and it will teach you about the character. Now, I do want to let you know there technically is a story skip to get you to the 3.0 stuff over in Lahai Roi. You can also skip to the 2.0 stuff if you wish to do that. However, even if you've heard not great things about the beginning of Wuthering Waves story, even the 1. Whatever stuff actually does have some pretty important story and good relationship building with some of the characters. So I actually wouldn't personally recommend skipping the story, and it does kind of miss some pretty important things in my opinion. So whether or not you do that is up to you. Just know that it is available. It doesn't actually skip the other parts of the story, so you can go back. It just allows you to kind of early access and go forward. So if you do need to use that in order to get some of the materials, like for the 3.0 characters, you can totally do that and then go back if you want. Just know that, like I said, it doesn't have the best story experience in my opinion, and I would definitely still recommend playing through even the 1.1, 1.2, 1.3 stuff, especially. The stories around characters like Chang Li and Shorekeeper are definitely worth playing through, and I highly, highly recommend it. Okay, so one of the most important things about understanding any gacha game really is the currency and knowing which currencies you get from where and what to use them on. So let's go ahead and start with this here. So if you go to the actual shop, this is kind of where I'm at right here, and I'm in the item exchange. Now we're in the title exchange because this is where you purchase the summon tokens that you need with your premium currency. In this case, your premium currency is going to be your asterite. This is what you use to do most things in the game, which includes buying your summon tokens. So we'll start on the left here. The gold materials here are going to be for limited time banners. The circular radiant tides here are going to be for the characters, and the forging tide is going to be for the weapons. Again, these are limited time character and weapon pulls. The lustrous tide here, the green sphere, is going to be for the standard banner. Now, it's the same material for both weapon and character banners, and as a new player, once you get a few characters, I would pretty much recommend just using any of these that you have on weapon banners to fill out your characters and kind of get them in the right spots. In most cases, the 5-star weapons, even the standard banner ones, are going to be better, and in some cases significantly better than any 4 stars that you've come across. And then we have these materials here, which are tied directly to the Cyberpunk Edgerunners collaboration, hence why they have the 28 days remaining in the upper left hand corner. So again, following the same pattern, we have the Dreamcatcher tide going for characters and the Shadow Forge tide going for weapons. For these two in particular, they actually specify exactly which banners you can use them on, so keep that in mind. You don't really want to buy extra of these, so just pull using your actual currency, each individual pull at a time. I highly doubt you'll be able to use the same currency moving forward for other collaborations. Notice how specifically this does seem to have the Edgerunner logo on it, so I think this might be only for Edgerunner stuff. Now, as you summon, you're going to be getting more materials, and every summon that you do will end up giving you some of this material here, this oscillated coral right here. So all of these corals are going to have the same basic shape, but they're going to look slightly different, so try and get used to what they look like. This can be used for any of these materials, and actually every single major patch we have, we refresh these as well, including the Radiant Tides, the Forging Tide, and the Lustrous Tide. So specifically try and make sure you save up enough each patch to purchase all of these just to make the most out of your experience. Now, if you get to the point like me where you've been playing for a while and you have extras, you can also buy these modifiers. They're okay. And then, anything else in here, but just be careful spending too much of this material because you do want to make sure you have enough for those pulls. And for reference, these are materials that for the most part, you can pretty much just farm in the open world by grinding mobs and stuff. But in some cases, it might be useful to buy a few of them here or there if you're trying to level up a character or a weapon or something. Now, when you start pulling into the 4-star and 5-star characters, you're going to start getting this material here. So this is called the Afterglow coral. Again, notice how it's that coral shape, but it looks slightly different. This is a more premium version of that coral and can be used to purchase wave bands, which is duplicates essentially for characters that you have. And this does include limited time characters when there is their corresponding banner currently active. Right now, we just have the collaboration banners, and so you don't see any of those characters here, but they would be here if their banners were active right now. And in general, I would recommend saving any of this Afterglow coral for specifically duplicates. That would be my highest priority, and then maybe character pulls as well, just because of the fact that, like, for me, I value characters more than weapons. You can usually use other weapons, even if it's not exactly super optimal on a particular character, to get most of their value. Now, for the collaborations, we also have specifically, this is a Cyberpunk elusive coral shop, and you can use this material here that again you get in the more premium currency, just like the last coral we went over. So again, from 4 stars and 5-star pulls, you'll get this currency, and you can use this to purchase duplicates of even collaboration units. So keep that in mind. You can purchase 2 of them here. And in this case, this wave band can be used for either Lucy or Rebecca, depending on who you choose, but you only get 2 of them. Now, there are a few other things down here that I think might be worth talking about as well. So I already bought these, but they're basically just a few limited time cosmetics. And I think that they're pretty worth it, and they're pretty easy to get. They're pretty cheap in cost. I think most things in here are not worth it. Specifically, it works the same thing for the Afterglow coral shop too. Like these transducers, don't bother. Premium tuners, don't bother. Unless you're a Giga Whale, just don't bother with any of this. And same can be said for the elusive shop. I would go for more pulls, I would go for limited time things, and that would pretty much be it. If you're at the end of the event and you still have some extra left over, of course you could purchase and just use it on the rest of this stuff. I don't imagine this will carry over. It looks very cyberpunky to me, and while we don't have any information about whether or not that's true, I would just err on the side of caution here. So when you first start playing the game, you'll probably be wanting to raise your union level here. This will give you access to a lot of other stuff, including access to more quests, more events, and just more resources in general. As you level it up, you'll also be able to increase your Soul 3 phase level. And as you rank that up, not only will you get access to more rewards from everything that you're doing, whether it be out in the world killing mobs or just being able to access more content, but you're also going to get extra stuff from your new player events, which is why we're going over this. It's pretty important to level. And so when you first start the game, you really want to make sure that you're just grinding through the main story as much as possible, and that will help raise it pretty effectively. But once you actually get the icons to appear up here in the upper right hand corner, I want to say it was roughly union level 8 or 7 or so, you'll be able to actually go and interact with the events section, which will bring you to a screen that sort of looks like this. And so this will give you access to the other events. Now, if you don't have events ending, what will happen is a couple of new player events will actually be at the top, and that will be number 1, this Herald of New Tides event. And this is going to be one of the most important events that you need to take advantage of. There are a bunch of reasons for that, but the most important one being is that there is a limited time on how long this event specifically lasts. I want to make this as clear as possible. This event only lasts for 30 days. Realistically, some of the rewards are actually pretty useful, like the Databank XP. So try and make the most out of your first 30 days. Now, the real advantage of this event is that you get to use these trial characters as you play for the first 30 days, and you can basically make no investment into them whatsoever. So it does mean that you can focus your investment into 2 other characters that you will be playing long term. This does mean that you will pretty much always have a very geared character your entire duration for these 30 days, which is why it is so important to try and take advantage of it for the duration of the event. Basically, it'll make like all of your boss fights, all of your farming, everything significantly easier because, as I said, you have a fully geared character. There's also another event that also lasts the same duration that we'll talk about in a moment. So it's very, very important that you make the most of your first 30 days. Now, unfortunately, the first character that they give you access to is Yin Lin, and she's not the best, and she isn't very fun to play either. But fortunately, they have added also Chang Li to this event, and she is very, very fun to play. She's very easy and good to play in the open world specifically as well. Without a doubt, in my opinion, she's the best character to play probably for the entire event. Now, you do have the option of Shorekeeper as well that you can trial and get used to in case you're interested in in getting her, but she's also the last character that you unlock much later into the game. And on top of that, she's a support character, so unless you're going to invest in one of the DPS characters early on, you'll still need a DPS character. It's probably worth noting though that the characters are not geared the best, and I imagine as you get further into your progression and leveling up your world that they'll get even better, because you do have the ability to synchronize their level as you continue your progression. The Herald of the New Tides also has the ability to help you level up some characters. So for example, these are going to be characters, these first three, these are all characters that are available right now for anyone to summon in the game. And so you can actually go and select on that character that you're looking to maybe get gear for. And if you are high enough level, which I currently am not, I would need to be 14 in order for this, Union rank 14. If you are high enough rank, you'll be able to challenge that content and get the rewards that you need to level them up a little bit, or get their gear, right? Like we even see down here. So the last one is actually a part of a special new player event. So this character right here I have currently selected is for Shorekeeper, and that is for a special convene that new players will have access to, which is called the New Voyage Companions, New Voyage Resonator Convene. Basically, you can pick one of the original 1.0 characters to try and pull for. However, of them all, I don't really recommend any of them except for Shorekeeper. It's not the most exciting thing to pull for a support character like Shorekeeper if you're new to the game, you don't have a true DPS or a main DPS yet. Now, you can fix that problem with the standard banner character selector. We'll talk about that more in a minute when we talk about that event. He truly is the best character in all of this, but anyone looking at this would tell you to likely pull just purely for Shorekeeper. And she's the only T0 character on this list. Most of them are T2 or T3. She has been T0 since the day she came out, and I don't really see that ever changing, to be honest. She is a extremely powerful character and is very worth trying to get. Something that's worth mentioning about this banner is that this banner specifically actually does use limited time pulls. And that's part of the reason why I really recommend only picking Shorekeeper from that banner, is because you are using that same material that you could use to get someone like Hayuki or Imeth or someone else who's really good. Okay, so the Herald of the New Tides event still has a few more things we need to talk about. So one of them being the featured content list. This is basically just a list of all the events on that event page, where you can just get an idea of all the rewards that you can still get by doing those activities. Keep in mind that while right now what you're looking at does include like 20 pulls here and 10 pulls here and 10 pulls here, these are from the anniversary and they're not going to be around for very long. And last but not least, Herald of the New Tides has the new Resonators tab, which is going to include a list of all the characters that you can summon for. And keep in mind, it does show that new Voyage companion one that I just mentioned before, where we can pick that 1.0 character. So the next thing we should probably talk about is the Solaris New Voyage celebration. This is going to be how you're going to get a character. Basically, if you look down here to the bottom left, you'll see that right now I have this character selected. So we can go down here, I can remove my camera for you guys, but you can select any of the standard banner characters that you want to pick here. But the way this event here works is we're going to be getting these festivity points, and you get them not on this page actually, is you actually have to go here and press the go button. And from here, there are different sections where you can actually go and get these festivity memories from. You do need to get 24, so you can figure that out for yourself, which ones you do want to target. You don't have to do them all. We have title memories, which is more about raising your union and databank level, along with doing main quest acts. They are just generics, like do 3 acts of the main quest, for example, so you don't have to do like one specific quest. So if you do skip to Lahairoi, so you could go and do a more modern, more recent story if you want to. We also have access to the scenic stuff, so if you're into more exploration and stuff like that, you'll get your points through this. The combat stuff is going to be more focused on doing tutorials, spending wave plates, doing the Tower of Adversity, doing Whimpering Wastes, and doing the 1,000 Gateways, which are all endgame activities, which we'll include later in this video. Again, feel free to use the chapters down below if you guys are trying to find that information. And then the rapid growth is just going to be talking about leveling up your resonators and getting them more gear, getting them echoes, etc. SORTA. So just making progress on your account overall. And then after you get all 24, you'll be able to get your selected character. Now, realistically, none of these are the best options, but Verena is probably the only real choice to be made here. However, I did just recommend that if you were to pull on the other banner, the new player banner, to pull for Shorekeeper, and they are both supports. And setting up your account with 2 supports right away, while it would be good in the long term, is going to be a little boring. So if you did pull for Shorekeeper, I would recommend trying to get either Encore from this, or maybe, you know, potentially spending or saving up or grinding enough currency to get a DPS to go along with her. And that would allow you to also pick up Verena here. Alternatively, if you picked up Shorekeeper and you don't have the resources to get anyone, you can go ahead and pick up Encore to use as a DPS character. Personally, if it was me, I would honestly probably try and pick up Shorekeeper via all the materials that you can grind in the world. And I think you might have enough resources to also pick up another good character that you like. But I don't think you would be wrong to try and target a actual DPS that you're interested in, because it's just going to make your gameplay feel a whole lot more interesting and exciting rather than playing with an older DPS like from the 1.0 era. Now, the one caveat with that is actually if we go back to the summon area, the Convene section, and we look down here, and we'll see that there is a summon banner called the Utterance of Marvel. So this is the Novice Convene. So like any other game you've probably played before, you've probably seen some kind of beginner banner. So this is like the original version of that. And so it does use standard banner pulls, so you can do this alongside the new Voyage Companions banner, but essentially it does allow you to do 10 summons for the price of 8, and then it will also guarantee you a 5-star character within the 50 limit that it gives you. So what I would actually recommend doing is waiting to pick your character from the event we're currently talking about until after you've gotten through this to see which character or characters you end up getting. Because if you were to do this and you got Encore, right, then you'd probably want to pick Verena, or vice versa. If you got Verena, you'd probably just double down on picking Encore. So try to make the most of the opportunities that you have with this, and then make your decision for the selector after that. Now, we do have a few more new player events that we should look at really quick. So one of those being the Gifts of Thawing Frost. This is going to be a daily login for the first 7 days, where you're going to get Sanhua on day 5. She's actually a pretty good character, especially for any ice teams. She's pretty easy and fun to play. So I would recommend checking her out once you do get her, especially if you're looking for that 3rd character option. And then if we scroll down all the way, what you're going to see is there's 2 more events down here. So you'll also have access to the Voyage's Beginning, which is more or less a collection of several other events that you'll see. And I'll show you in a second where this 5-star weapon chest comes from, but you'll be able to get a 5-star weapon when you do hit Union level 45. But you can see down here the Sanhua that we just talked about, for example. So the other event is the Awakening Journey. And this is basically just as you hit different Union rank levels, you'll actually get a bunch of rewards. But that's not all. We'll talk about it in a moment. Leveling up will also get you some additional bundles as well. So when you get to level 45, you'll actually get access to the standard weapon supply chest. And this is basically the original set of standard weapons that you could just pick whatever you wanted from. Typically, I think most people went for the one-handed sword. It does seem to be a pretty standout weapon, but also I think Static Miss is pretty good for a support DPS pistol. I'm actually using that on Rebecca, for example. And then alternatively, if you go into the store and you go down here into the bundles, you'll have these level bundles right here. And as you level up, you'll get access to each of these. What you'll find is that the early ones provide you more access to additional pulls. And then later on down the line, once you start hitting level 70 and above, you'll actually start getting some limited time pulls. So keep that in mind as well. One thing I want to quickly mention too is that Wuthering Waves is really good at helping you find whatever you need. So take Verena here. If I wanted to ascend her and get her leveled up a little bit more, I would need to go and get some of these materials here. But if I didn't know where to get them, I can find that information down here. You'll see I can get them from howlers. I can also do purification by using lower level materials, purifying them into the higher level materials, or converting different materials to these ones. But in this case, if I wanted to track the howlers that drop the pieces that I need, I can just click that button and immediately find where they are on the map closest to me and get the material that I need there. This can be anything that you might need, including any flowers that you might need, as well as any spots where they might be selling them, like the Shifang Pharmacy. It also includes any boss materials you might need, like I can get more of this from the Morning Axe. And really, you can use this to find anything that you need for anything in the game, leveling up characters, leveling up weapons, etc. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about gear progression. So in this game, characters have weapons and then they also have echoes. And so weapons are going to be pretty similar in how most of their stats and stuff work. What you're going to have is some kind of main scaler here, in this case attack, some kind of substat, in this case crit rate. It can also be like crit damage or energy recharge or other things. And then you'll have usually the first line of their passive here is going to be some kind of attribute bonus. So in this case, a damage bonus, but it might be HP or energy recharge again. And then it will have some additional effect. And that additional effect is usually worth a pretty significant chunk. Usually a character's signature weapon will be about a 20% damage boost for them specifically overall compared to a like standard banner weapon. Because of that, there are times when, like with Rebecca here, where I end up using a standard banner weapon, and that allows me to save resources specifically for characters. Keep in mind, a standard banner weapon will get you 80% of the output roughly of a limited time character. And to me, I find that more valuable. Over time, you'll also just have a ton of standard pulls, and you can use those on the weapon banner pretty freely to pick up any weapons you might want for a character like this. And sometimes it can be even, less of a 20% gap between these standard weapons and these signature weapons. So when it comes to talking about echoes, the way that it works is you have a main echo here, which is your 4 costs, and then you have 2 3 costs and 2 1 costs. And this does end up being a later game thing. You're not going to have the ability to slot in 12 total costs until you level up your databank a little bit later, which we'll talk about right after this. So every echo is a part of a different set. And so you'll see down here in the bottom left-hand corner, I have this Trailblazing Star set for IMF. If you click into your echoes, you can actually get a more detailed version of what this looks like. And so that will actually tell you it gives 10% fusion damage and then 20% crit rate and additional 20% fusion damage, conflicting the other things up here. But more importantly, when you're actually looking to gear out your character, you can actually just filter by the different set bonuses. And that's going to be what you're going to want to do here. You can filter by the set bonus and then by the cost that you're looking for, and you can get an idea about which of the actual echoes you're going to go and use on a specific character. So when it comes to figuring out which set you want to use on a specific character, there are a couple of things you can do. So obviously you could just take a look at the character if you know enough about them and say, oh, well, fusion damage is probably pretty good. But if you don't know anything about like fusion burst or tune rupture, you might not know this was good for IMF. So kind of 2 things that I would recommend doing here, especially for new players, is you can go ahead and go just check over on Prydwen.gg. And then under the build section for each character, they actually say the recommended sets that you can take a look at. However, if you want to do it in game, you won't have access to this right off the bat, but later on down the line, you'll be able to go to your Resonator section and you can see this Ascension Planner here. This Ascension Planner will help you set up for the right echoes, as well as help you find the things that you need. So if I wanted to work on Lucilla, for example, I could see that I need all these materials to level her up with her skills and her weapons and whatnot. But more importantly, if I go to the Echoes section, we can see what the game kind of recommends that you do. And so this will kind of give you, at least an idea about where you would want to start farming maybe, or what echoes might be the best for her. However, I want to bring Rebecca up as an example for this. So Rebecca, for me, is actually using this Moonlit set, which is one of the original sets that launched with the game that's good for your sub DPSs. But the recommendations are actually that she uses a different couple of sets. So it probably wants you to use Atom Smasher as her new echo for her 4 cost, and then a 2-piece on the Void Thunder and a 2-piece on the Lingering Tunes. And while that is an option for her, her, I don't really think that's the best option for her. So do keep in mind that, you know, what you're going to be using and what you want to farm isn't necessarily going to be the exact thing that the game recommends that you do. This works out better for me because I fully invested in my Lucy and not in Rebecca. I don't really care about her personal damage, so getting these sets here aren't really going to help me that much. Instead, I'm focusing more on her ability to make Lucy do more damage with this set here. And again, if I didn't have this set equipped, it wouldn't even be on this screen. So do keep in mind that you do need to kind of know what you're looking for. And again, you can always just check, you know, prydwen.gg and then find your characters and then go to the build section there. And that should help you get a pretty good idea about what you want to build. Now, most characters will follow the same kind of gearing path, especially your damage dealers. The 4-cost Echo is a little bit special. It always has like a unique effect, and usually it will have the unique equip effect as well. But on top of that, it's the only one that can roll crit damage and crit rate by default. So naturally, it ends up being a really, really important part of your set. And not only that, but just a big part of your damage overall. So typically you want either a crit damage or a crit rate main stat, and then everything down here is a stat that was rolled. So a typical 5-star that hasn't been rolled yet will actually look like one of these. They'll have a main stat, the kind of substat, and then you'll be able to roll 5 additional stats for the legendary versions of these echoes. While I was editing this video, I was like, you know what? I'll just go ahead and roll one of these and then show you guys what the process is like. And it went awesome. So check it out. Yo, actually sick, bro. Let's go. Almost every single damage dealer is looking for the same kind of things, though. They're going to be looking for crit damage, crit rate, attack percent, and then whatever other damage lines are beneficial. But more or less, you want to try and hit all 3 of those on the same one. So specifically for 3-cost echoes, what you're going to find is that almost always you're going to be going for the elemental damage that matches your character. So in this case, we have Imeth, who's a fusion character, and she wants fusion damage. You can also supplement this with attack percentage if you do have it, but generally fusion damage is better. Of course, it's going to be different for supports, but just for your damage dealers, know the elemental damage is almost always superior. And then when it comes to your 1-cost echoes, you're just going to pick whatever they scale on. So it's either attack, HP, or defense. So there's not a lot of options here, and most of the time you're just going to be going for attack. Notice how for me, I have crit rate, crit damage, attack percent, HP, not that good, and resonance skill damage, not that good for Imeth here. So this ends up being a like 3-line echo or a 3-line artifact, if that's the terminology you're used to, which isn't necessarily the best. You know, ideally you'd get all 5 lines to be positive bonuses, but this is kind of more or less what you're looking for getting into the end game. You're not going to be able to get these earlier on because you're not going to have these yellow legendary echoes yet. You'll have lower grades, you'll have blue and green quality echoes, and so for there you're just gonna pretty much just be looking for raw like attack stats, for example. It isn't until much later into the game that you're looking for like 3-liners like this, but more or less where I'm at in the end game, this is kind of what I'm looking for as a bare minimum on a character that I want to play. Every single echo hopefully has like some kind of attack bonus and then crit rate and crit damage. Making this video has made me realize I need to reroll some more stuff for Imeth. I thought she was better equipped than that. Let's go over to my Lucy, who's actually really well equipped, and you'll see that I have like crit rate and crit damage and crit rate. So on 4 costs, for example, that can roll crit rate or crit damage as their actual main stat, you can double down on that. So I have crit rate twice on this particular echo. This is a phenomenal 4 cost for her. It's Lucy's best in slot 4 cost echo, and it has double crit rate with crit damage and heavy attack damage bonus, as well as attack percentage. It's literally a 4-line, almost perfect. If this had just been flat attack, it would have been a perfect echo for her. And you'll see that kind of going down the list, I think most of my Lucy's echoes are 4-liners. So we have like crit damage, crit rate, heavy attack, and base attack. While not as good as attack percentage, this is still very, very good. And even basic attack, I feel like isn't terrible for Lucy. And again, you'll see crit rate, crit damage. So you'll see we're kind of going for the same stats. But to be honest, more or less every single character that you build that's a damage dealer is going to be built the same way. You'll want these first 3 lines, and then the last 2, it'll be something closer to what you need. Some characters need a little bit more energy recharge to kind of smooth out their rotation a bit. That's an option as well. But it's really going to be up to you and how your playstyle is and how much you're min-maxing that. Again, Prydwen will be a pretty good spot for you to go to kind of get a feel for what's going to be good stats for your characters. And at the end of the day, your character can look something like this. Now, this Lucy happens to be one of my better geared characters, so you're maybe not going to shoot for exactly this high of stats, but overall, this kind of would be what I would try and go for. You also do need to take into consideration some things though. So for example, if I had crit rate really high here, and I was still running a character like Shorekeeper who buffs my crit rate by an additional, I think, 12%, right? If I had 90% crit rate and I had 12%, I'm over capping on my crit rate. So that's something to keep in mind. Also, characters like Shorekeeper, who are your support, usually want different stats. Notice how her attack is really low and her crit damage and crit rate are almost non-existent, but her energy recharge is really high. That's because some characters scale on different things, and specifically Shorekeeper here is scaling more on HP and energy recharge than things like attack and crit rate and crit damage, which kind of makes sense for your support characters to do. However, that doesn't mean every support character is like that. Verena, for example, is going to be a character that is a support, but she scales off of attack, and personally my Verena is not built whatsoever, so her stats aren't very good. Chissa is going to be another character that also does scale with attack and does a lot of damage, so it's actually beneficial for her to have good stats for both crit rate, crit damage, and attack as well. So really, different characters are going to look for different things, but more or less, you'll find that most characters do build something like this, at least for your damage dealers. So now that we've talked about echoes a little bit and you kind of know what you're looking for, how are you going to go about getting your echoes? Well, there's a couple of things we need to talk about maybe beforehand for a moment. So we'll go ahead and go into your databank here. You'll see that I am currently level 30, which is the maximum level for the databank. You're going to see stuff like this right here. So this is the base drop rate that you can actually get from any echo or any enemy that you destroy in the game. And so as you level up, this is going to increase. So leveling up your databank is going to be really important if you want to get more gear and you want to farm echoes later on. But there's also some other things you want to be aware of. So for example, the cost 4 enhanced drop rate, this increases your weekly maximum of like guaranteed drops. So if I want to go farm a cost 4, it will be even easier for me to get them, and I can get 20 of them on the first try. The cost 1 and cost 3 enhanced drops are also here as well, which do the same thing, but again for cost 1 and cost 3 enemies. And then the highest drop rarity is going to be very, very important. This also is what determines your cost limit, so how many echoes you can actually equip and what your total cost of your equipped echoes can be. And at endgame, you'll be able to equip cost 12 in total, but earlier on, you won't be able to do that. When you first start off the game, what you'll see is until you get databank level 5, you're only going to be getting green echoes. As you move forward to level 5, you'll start slowly getting blue quality echoes and you'll get less green quality echoes. And that just kind of continues to go up and up and up until you start getting some purples, and then eventually you can earn some of the 5-star echoes. But you will have to wait until level 15 to even start trying to get these 5-star echoes. Before this point, I would say just use anything that has some stats that you can use. Notice how there's going to be different tuner levels at these different qualities too. So there's purple tuners, there's green tuners, there's blue tuners. The point being is until you hit this level, you don't really want to worry too much about your echoes. Don't get kind of bogged down if you don't have any good ones. You'll get them eventually later on. I also wouldn't recommend farming echoes before this point either, and realistically you probably want to save any stamina until much later anyway. Once you hit level 19, you'll start getting 80% drop rates of 5 stars with only a 20% 4 stars, and in that case, you know, you're gonna have better returns for sure, or even waiting until you're the 100% drop rate. And the easiest way to be actually leveling up your databank is just gonna be getting new echoes. Your first entry of higher rarity echoes is just going to give you more databank XP, so just make sure you're going and you're collecting the rarities that are available to you. Now, if you are a new player, don't forget that you will get databank XP also from the new player tides event that we talked about in the very beginning. So make sure you're taking advantage of that and getting all the free resources that are available to you as a new player. Now, in here we have a few other things as well. So you can go here and you can actually look at the full list of echoes. And if you do have one that you haven't gotten yet, you can actually just go down here and you can try and track the echo. And then once you detect it, it will actually give you an idea of what the echo is that you're missing here. Another thing you can do is you can check out the echoes that you have unlocked for all the different sets to give you an idea about what you should run if you want that set. And so you'll see that even when you're missing one down here, again, you can click on this and you can start detecting the enemy to find this echo. Finding all the echoes will also give you more Databank XP, so it's going to be good to try and fill out these sets when you find that you're missing XP. The data merge here allows you to target the gear set bonuses that you want. So for this week, I haven't done mine yet, and right now, since I noticed that my iMeth needs some work, let's go ahead and work on iMeth here. So I know that iMeth wants this set right here. I can go ahead and confirm, and that will take us to this window here. This is the window of all of my available echoes. I've been playing this game every day since the launch of the game, and so you can see I just have a ton of echoes. But I'm gonna go ahead and just select all. It does limit the amount that you can do because you can only get 10 of these per week of the targeted version. And then we'll just go ahead and merge, and I'll hit OK, and you'll see that this actually gave me 10 of the echoes that I can use for iMeth. And because of our auto lock settings, it actually already auto-locked some ones that we can use, specifically these attack 1 costs. Unfortunately, the 3 cost wasn't very good, so we could maybe re-roll this Havoc to a fusion bonus if we wanted to use one of those modifiers. But we did get a couple of 1 costs that we can run, and we can try and get some better ones for iMeth. Now, this option over here is actually for modifying your echoes. So we did just get that 3 cost, so we can go ahead and go down here and we can filter by the set we just got. So I think it was this guy right here. Yeah, the Havoc damage bonus. Go ahead and pick him, and now he's here. We can modify this to fusion, and once we hit modify, he'll be a fusion damage echo, and it will automatically lock based on our auto lock settings. And you can actually do this when you're upgrading your echoes as well. So if we go back into our resonators and you go into here, we'll actually take a look at this right here, and we'll see this guy right here. So he is an option for us. Again, it already, discarded him for us. But if we go ahead and go to upgrade here and then go down to this section here, you'll be able to modify his stats, and we could pick fusion damage bonus like this. And finally, for the very last option, this is going to be the echo management section, where it basically just helps you set up your plans for how you want to deal with your echoes and which ones you want to lock, which ones you don't want to lock, etc. For the most part, you can just use these suggested plans, and admittedly, this whole thing can be a little clunky to use. But as you can see, I have everyone on the auto discard except for the new set here. So let's go ahead and do that. So notice how these ones that are on that have the check mark have this disable button, but this one doesn't have anything. So we'll hit enable plan, and then we'll edit this plan, and we can actually lock and unlock the ones we want. So I don't actually really care about the bonuses too much for this. So we're gonna say we'll get rid of these. And then we're going to go ahead and only keep these. So we're going to lock the crit rate, crit damage ones, and anything else, we're just going to hit the discard. I have so many and I can farm so many in the future. I'm not too worried about it. So we'll go ahead and save that here. And that will basically set up our plan, and it will help auto discard later. One quick tip I can give you is that the auto discard isn't really discarding anything. It's more or less just marking them for deletion later, so that way when you go in and you want to delete them, you can do it by just filtering for the quote-unquote discarded ones. So that's just something to keep in mind, and part of the reason why this is so funky. Kind of sounded like auto discard was going to automatically discard the ones you didn't want, but it does keep them around in case you do want to modify them later on. Now, if you do try and use these suggested plans, do note that it will actually clear your current plan configurations and import the suggested ones for you. And you can do that. I have some customized ones already, so I don't want to do too much of this, but it's really up to you on what you want to do here. If you want to go through and manage them yourselves, you can totally do that. If you want to use the suggested, you can do that as well. Now, when it comes to actually getting our echoes, like let's keep using iMeth here as our example. So once you know what set you need, you can go to the Sonata gallery in your databank. Again, this third tab here, and you can just go to the set that you want and use this to find the 4-cost echoes. 4-cost echoes are pretty much always bosses of some kind, so you're going to be farming them And don't forget that you get the enhanced absorptions, which doesn't mean guaranteed echoes every single time you do it for that amount of times. Alternatively, you can just go to your guidebook to the material collection, and once you select your resonator here that you're looking for, it will just pretty much show you the 4 costs that you're going to be needing. So in this case, I do need to get Sigillum for IMET. Now, the guidebook does allow you to track the tacit fields that you might be looking for in here. Notice how we have IMET selected, and it does show us the different tacit fields and nests where we can farm her echoes. But you can also go down manually to the tacit suppression here, and this is going to just list all of the tacit fields that you have access to. And remember, tacit fields require you to use wave plates, so your daily energy, and you can farm your echoes here. Notice how there's actually an IMS symbol right here, showing me that I can farm her set in both of these tacit fields. And then finally, we have the Nightmare Echo nest locations, where you can go to each of these nests and you can farm additional echoes every single day for these sets. And then they also have the Tacit Discord nest in Lahai Roy, showing the same kind of thing. And again, it does mark the correct one for IMET here. The nests in general, you don't have to spend any wave plates on. You can just go to that location, and then once you defeat those echoes, you'll be able to collect them as your echoes. You do get quite a bit of echoes when you're doing this, but it's sometimes necessary to farm the tacit fields instead. And this can be a little bit annoying because you can only do so many per day. Now, with refills, you could do as many of the tacit Discord fields as you want per day. So it's up to you. Alternatively, when you are out in the world, anytime you destroy a monster, based on the percentage given in your databank, you'll be able to just collect random echoes in the world. So I think at this point, we're going to transition into going over the kind of end game activities, and then also your like weekly / daily routine. I may make a future video specifically talking about like Toon Break and like the other elements. There's like Spectral Frazzle and like Fusion Burst and things like that. I wanted to include that here, but we're already getting really long in terms of this video. So if that is something you guys would like, let me know in the comments down below, and maybe I can make a like advanced combat guide kind of video. So first up, for the end game content, let's talk about the Tower of Adversity. So the base version of the Tower of Adversity actually starts out with the stable zone here. Now the flow of this is always going to be kind of similar for all of the different floors, and so you're going to have some effect that's taking place on your characters, and it will help you maybe figure out who you want to use on the team. Later on, this will be more effective and more valuable to understand, but in the first one, it's really not that big of a deal, or even the second one. If we go and look at the actual characters, though, you'll see that there's these little lightning symbols next to the characters. And the reason for that is because each character starts out with 10 energy, and participating in the battles actually removes the energy from the characters. So if we go back and look, you'll see that the first floor here is cost 1, cost 2, cost 3, and cost 4 for all the floors. That does effectively mean that one team of 3 characters can do the entire section of the tower. But some people do decide to just use one character if a character is strong enough and you don't need a whole team. Now the goal here is to actually complete it and get these challenges done and make sure you're 3-starring every stage. And that's more or less how the tower actually works. You'll see that the experimental zone does require 2 total teams, and again, you can do this with 2 characters if you want to, but the important thing to understand is that while you're completing both sides of the tower, you still have the same energy limits. Also, do take note that sometimes you're going to have different mob types. So if you have a big group of fusion enemies, you probably don't want to use a fusion character. Once you have completed both the stable and the experiment zone, then you'll actually unlock the hazard zone, which is going to be pretty much the same thing, except for the fact that it actually resets on a regular basis. Notice how in the upper left-hand corner, it says 23 days remaining. So the way that this one works is it actually does reset, as I mentioned, and there's a few more things to it. So you're actually going to be getting a bunch of asterite and other resources that you can use in the actual shop down here. But the way that each side of the tower works is that each side is going to require a full amount of energy. So you can have one team do the left side, one team do the right side, and then 2 teams do the middle. The middle changes the vigor cost of each fight, and so the vigor cost of each stage in the middle section is going to be 5, as you can see here. So you do actually need, in total, you need 4 teams to actually do this activity. Now, a pretty big change from before is that the affix, the thing right here that you're going to be getting that's going to be buffing you up or nerfing the enemy, is actually going to be changing every time the tower resets. So you do want to kind of play into the strengths of this if you can. So unfortunately, I wasn't paying enough attention to this, and I should have used probably my arrow team here instead of on the other side. Now, the one caveat to that is my other team is a fusion team, and so although it would have been nice to use my arrow team on the other side, my fusion team isn't going to do the best against a fusion boss. So in that case, it might be good to kind of ignore this and then try and do the best you can anyway. It really depends on you and the teams that you've built. So this does kind of encourage you to build a variety of teams along with a variety of elements, so that way you can take advantage of different affixes like what you're seeing here. And then what you'll notice is as you start getting further in these towers, you're going to start seeing bigger, badder bosses. And then actually as you go through in the middle tower, you'll see down here, you'll actually be fighting two bosses during the same floor. Now for the Whimpering Wastes, you're going to see that down here, the Forbidden Waters, this is going to be essentially like the first section of the tower that you have to complete before you can actually do the respawning waters, which is the one that resets. You're going to be grinding your asteroid from. The way this activity works is it uses two teams and then it will give you a small buff. Now this buff can be pretty valuable, but on top of that, you can actually choose a buff of your own based on the inventory items that you've obtained from unlocking them. And as you get further on, you'll unlock more and more. One thing to note is that there is a number by these, and there is a limited number of uses for them. If you scroll down, you can use these ones, for example, that have the infinite uses. So make sure you take advantage of that for as long as you can. Something I want to mention here is that the type of combat is very different in Whimpering Wastes. So here you're going to be doing a bunch of AoE damage and fighting a bunch of different mobs, and then you're building up a gauge slowly, and then eventually you'll be able to kind of do a big burst more or less, where you'll get like a big buff, and then you try to take advantage of that buff to do the most damage while you can. That allows you to really power through the rest of the phase. So it is kind of strategic in making sure that you're building up the buff and you're ready to use it when it's actually activated. This type of event plays more specifically into a few characters' playstyles, and it does change what is considered to be like quote unquote meta very significantly. So I'll go ahead and throw an image of what the tier list looks like for this activity. What you're going to see is characters like Frolova are very, very powerful here. All right, so when it comes to our final piece of endgame content, so we have the Endstate Matrix here. So realistically, this is a really interesting piece of content that I feel like you don't find in most games, and it's a really simple design that just makes sense. So in the first phase here, you have the ability to use 3 teams and you have to get through these bosses here. And once you do get enough score, which is this 10,000 score here, then you actually unlock the Singularity expansion. And from here, you can actually use basically as many teams as you can actually field to actually work on getting the higher progress here. The reason why this is cool is this is like a long-term goal, right? A new player isn't really going to jump into this and do all that well. They just don't have the teams that they need to field in order to do this activity. There are some cool caveats though, that like when you're doing it, you can actually use demo resonators for any of the resonators that you do have. So there is a lot of flexibility here. As long as you have the characters, you can use a somewhat completed version of them to do the activity. So I could go and I could make a team of characters that I've never actually built before and try them out. Now, part of this activity is also that you get to pick a buff here. I'm pretty sure these buffs kind of rotate, but I do think the one on the far left, the general enhancement, is going to be the kind of static one that's always going to be there. These, like this one here and this one here, seem like they're similar to the current characters that are available via the collaboration, and then we just have like Hayuki, so I think that's the reason why they're there. This activity is actually really, really cool, and I really like it. You actually get to see different buffs that the bosses actually do get, so that's kind of cool and interesting too, and it seems like just kind of over time, you know, they're picking up different skills, and they're doing more damage, they have higher health pools, they level up, right? So in the stability accords, they start at level 90 and now he's level 110, etc., right? It really caters to like as you build your characters long term, there's a reason for it, right? Like in most other games, you have the tower related activity. Maybe you need a few teams, but overall, at some point, you're going to have too many teams that you've built that you just can't use the characters anymore. And this kind of fixes that. And actually, one caveat that I wanted to mention too is you'll see how I have Shorekeeper right here. and I have Shorekeeper right here. So some supports like Shorekeeper and Varina, for example, you do get to use in 2 different teams. So that's kind of a unique thing too. You don't have to worry about needing as many supports for something like this, but of course you are going to need a bunch. So now that we've kind of gone over, everything you need to know about the beginning of the game and then even like end game activities and stuff like that, I wanted to take a moment and just kind of go over what it would be like to do your daily and weekly routine. So important things that you want to make sure that you do daily and weekly. So specifically your dailies, you want to try and get all of the additional resources that you get here by doing your daily activity points. And that can be done in a variety of different ways. But personally, what I end up doing almost every single time is I'm usually farming a lot for the echoes that I want for my teams. And so you'll find that even just by spending 180 wave plates, which is 180 stamina, you can get 60 points immediately. Then if you perform 3 intros and 3 resonance liberations, you can get another 20 points, which will end up being 80 points guaranteed just from spending some energy and doing some intros and ultimates. That's usually going to be pretty easy and you can pretty much do that anywhere. And then on top of that, if you do things like get an echo, for example, like if you're farming echoes, that's the last 20 points you need. Or alternatively, you can collect 5 materials or do cooking, etc. There's a lot of ways to make that really, really simple, but in reality, the daily requirement for what you need to do to get these 100 points is pretty small, and you should be able to spend these wave plates and get these points. Sometimes I can do it in under 5 minutes. Now, when it comes to weeklies, they've recently revamped this. And so the way that this works now is there's a couple of different activities with more on the way, it seems, to kind of get these points. But typically what I'll do is the Fantasy of 1,000 Gateways. This is essentially a roguelike activity that will actually give you a buff, as you'll see right here, which usually has something to do with the recommended weekly activity characters. So if you take one of these characters, you'll be able to get all the points you need in one run. Notice how the base weekly activity points is 4,000 and you do need 6,000. So if you take one of these characters, you'll be able to finish it no matter what. Now, you don't have to use these characters. I could take a level 1 Alto if I wanted to. Just having him on the team is enough. But obviously, they do get a buff that will be pretty helpful when trying to clear the content. For this roguelike, just really focus on having fun. It's really not too difficult, and you don't really need to worry about it too much. Just play, you can use one character and pretty much go whatever path you want and still be able to do pretty well here. This isn't really your kind of like min-max, try hard activity. This is just like a relax, chill out, become overpowered as hell, and have some fun. So just pick whatever buffs look nice and fun to you and enjoy. Personally, I find the roguelite more fun. However, the other activity is like a weird little board game mini game thing. It's actually kind of fun too, but it's, it's very, it's 2D and it's a board game and it's not really like the Wuthering Waves kind of gameplay that we kind of know and love, right? So, definitely check that out if you're interested in doing that. But I do feel like it's probably faster in most cases to just get the points that you want from the 1,000 Gateways, especially once you kind of get familiar with it and kind of know what you're looking for in terms of the buffs or the type of build that you're going for. Well, guys, I think that that's kind of it and everything that I think you realistically need to know about Wuthering Waves. Now, of course, there's going to be more, as I mentioned previously, like advanced combat stuff. And I probably will make a video going over some of that stuff later, but this should be the core of like what you really need to know about the different game systems and the different activities and stuff like that. If there is something that you feel like I missed, comment down below. Let me know what it is and I can try and make another video or a short or something covering it. If you have any questions, feel free to ask them down below. I'm always happy to discuss, Wuthering Waves or any of the other games that we cover or anything with you guys at any time. So let me know. Like the video if you guys like the video. Subscribe to the channel if you want to see more stuff like this, and I'll catch you guys in the next one. Have a good one, guys. Peace.